The rain had stopped just an hour before the party was supposed to begin, but the world outside still looked gray and damp. Inside the grand dining hall of the Beaumont estate, crystal chandeliers sparkled against polished marble floors. Everything about the room screamed wealth: gold-trimmed drapes, a towering floral arrangement, and a cake so elaborate it looked like it belonged in a magazine. But in the middle of it all sat a small figure, alone at the end of the table. Her name was Isabelle Beaumont. She had just turned 13. Her chair wasn't one of the high-backed leather seats like the others. It was a wheelchair. The chrome frame gleamed under the light, but Isabelle's posture was small, guarded. Her hands rested gently on the armrests as if she was afraid to draw attention to herself. This was supposed to be her birthday party. And it was. At least on paper. Her father, Charles Beaumont, the CEO of a multinational conglomerate, had spared no expense. The guest list was filled with his business associates, their spouses, and their impeccably dressed children. But the party wasn't really for Isabelle. It was for networking, for keeping up appearances. She knew it, and she felt it in the cold space between her and everyone else. The other kids clustered together at the far end of the table, laughing over private jokes. Occasionally, one would glance her way, but their eyes quickly darted back to their group. The parents didn't notice, or pretended not to. Isabelle's disability wasn't new. She had been in a wheelchair since she was 8, after a car accident changed everything. But in her father's circles, people treated it like an inconvenience, something to be politely ignored. No one seemed to realize that her heart still ached for the same things other kids wanted: to belong, to be included, to be seen. The party went on without her. Music played. Laughter rose and fell. Servers moved gracefully between guests, topping off glasses and offering hors d'oeuvres. Isabelle sat quietly, staring at the cake in front of her. It was a masterpiece, 3 tiers frosted in delicate pinks and gold, crowned with sugar flowers. But what good was a beautiful cake if you had no one to share it with? From where she sat, she could see her father in deep conversation with 2 men in tailored suits. They spoke in low voices, smiling with that calculated charm adults use when every word is a chess move. Not once did Charles glance in her direction. Her stepmother, Amelia, floated through the room like she was walking a runway, her laughter just a little too loud, her attention fixed on anyone who could offer her more status. Minutes passed. The cake remained untouched. No one had sung, "Happy Birthday." Isabelle's throat tightened and she fought the sting in her eyes. Crying here would only make things worse. Then the doors at the far end of the hall opened. A small group entered, late arrivals it seemed. Most guests barely noticed, but Isabelle did. Among them was a tall black man in his late 20s, dressed in a crisp but modest suit. He didn't seem to move with the same careful performance as the others. His eyes scanned the room, sharp but warm, as if he wasn't here just to be seen. He was here to see. And then, something strange happened. His gaze landed on her. Not in that fleeting, uncomfortable way people sometimes looked, but like he saw her fully. Her chair. Her cake. Her solitude. He took a step toward her. And Isabelle's heart skipped, because in a room full of people who acted like she was invisible, here was someone moving with purpose in her direction. The music kept playing, the conversations kept flowing, but for Isabelle, the room felt suddenly quieter. And in that quiet, she wondered, was he really coming over? The sound of his footsteps was almost drowned out by the clinking of glasses and the hum of distant conversation. But to Isabelle, each one seemed to echo in the hollow space between her and the rest of the room. She didn't know who he was. He wasn't dressed like the CEOs or their perfectly groomed sons. His suit was neat but not designer, his shoes shined but not expensive. He walked with an unhurried confidence, the kind that didn't come from money but from knowing exactly who you were. When he reached her end of the table, he didn't pause to glance at the others or scan the crowd for approval. He simply stopped beside her chair and looked down at the untouched slice of cake sitting lonely on the plate in front of her. There was no pity in his face, only a kind of genuine curiosity, like he was wondering why a girl on her birthday would be sitting by herself in a room full of people. Isabelle's instinct was to brace herself. People rarely approached her without some awkward, rehearsed sympathy. But his presence felt different. Grounded. Solid. There was a kindness that didn't feel forced, and it unsettled her in the best way. He didn't linger over the silence. Instead, he shifted slightly as if making space for someone else to follow. And then Isabelle noticed her. A young girl, maybe 11 or 12, wearing a pale blue dress that looked homemade but carefully pressed. Her hair was braided into neat rows, her shoes slightly scuffed but clean. She clutched a small paper bag in one hand and stood just behind him, watching Isabel with a tentative smile. The man placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder and leaned down just enough to speak to her. Isabel couldn't hear his words, but she saw the girl's shoulders relax, her smile widen. Then, in one smooth motion, he pulled out a chair beside Isabel's and sat down, motioning for the girl to take the seat on the other side. They were close enough now that Isabel could smell the faint scent of rain still clinging to their clothes. The girl set her paper bag down on the table and began to fidget with the top, as if working up the courage to open it. The man glanced at Isabel again, and for a brief second, their eyes locked. In that moment she felt something shift inside her, something warm, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Around them, the party continued as if nothing had changed. Her father was still locked in conversation, her stepmother still weaving through the guests like she was part of the decor. But here, in this small corner of the grand dining hall, the air felt different. Isabel noticed the way the man positioned his chair, not angled toward the crowd but toward her, as though the rest of the room didn't matter. The girl leaned forward, pointing discreetly at the cake, her expression a mix of awe and delight. Isabel felt a smile tug at the corners of her lips before she could stop it. She wasn't sure why they'd come over. Maybe they felt sorry for her. Maybe they were just being polite. But as the man rested his elbows lightly on the table and the girl finally opened the paper bag to reveal what was inside, Isabel's chest tightened, not with sadness but with a strange, cautious hope. It was such a small thing, two strangers choosing to sit with her, but in this moment, it felt monumental. And somewhere deep down, she had the unshakable sense that this encounter was about to change everything. Inside the paper bag, carefully wrapped in tissue, was a small cupcake. It wasn't anything like the towering masterpiece at the center of the table. The frosting was simple, a swirl of pale yellow with a few rainbow sprinkles scattered unevenly. It leaned slightly to one side as if it had traveled a long way to get here. But there was something about it, about the way it was handled, that made it seem precious. The young girl set it gently on the table between them, her small hands lingering for a moment before she pulled them back. Isabel stared at it, unsure what to say. It was such a humble thing in the middle of all this extravagance, yet it seemed to hold more care than anything else in the room. The man leaned back slightly, giving Isabel space as if he understood this moment was hers to process. His presence was steady, not pushy. He didn't rush to explain the cupcake or why they'd brought it. He simply let it be there, something offered, not imposed. For the first time that day, Isabel felt like she wasn't on display. No one was pretending to be interested in her for her father's sake. No one was glancing at her wheelchair before darting their eyes away in discomfort. This was different. The man and the girl were here because they wanted to be, not because it looked good but because it was good. Her eyes flickered between the cupcake and the untouched slice of cake in front of her. The big cake, perfect and polished, was a showpiece meant for photographs. But the little cupcake, it was meant to be eaten, to be shared. She felt her throat tighten again, but not in the same way as before. The girl caught Isabel's gaze and gave her a shy, encouraging nod. Something in that look felt like an invitation, not just to eat but to let her guard down. Isabel reached out slowly, her fingers brushing the edge of the tissue paper. She didn't lift it yet. She just let her hand rest there, as if acknowledging that yes, this moment mattered. Across the room, a burst of laughter erupted from a cluster of guests. Her father's deep voice carried over, confident and commanding. But here at this end of the table, it felt like they were in a different world entirely. A quieter, truer one. The man finally spoke, not with his mouth but with his eyes. There was something in them that told her she was seen, that he understood the quiet ache of being on the outside looking in. She didn't know how he knew. But he knew. And for the first time in a long time she didn't feel so small. She took the smallest bite of the cupcake, the sweetness hitting her tongue in a way that felt richer than anything a professional baker could create. Maybe it was because it wasn't just sugar she was tasting, it was the care baked into it, the thought that someone had carried it here just for her. The girl smiled wider now, leaning in just a little closer. The man's gaze softened, as though he was watching something important unfold. Isabel didn't speak, but she didn't need to. The moment spoke for itself. Around them, the party still pulsed with noise and movement. No one seemed to notice that the birthday girl had found her own celebration at the far end of the table. And while she didn't know exactly who these two strangers were or why they had come, she knew with absolute certainty that she didn't want them to leave. The cupcake was nearly gone now, a few crumbs scattered on the napkin between them. Isabel felt a quiet fullness, not from the food, but from the strange comfort of having company that didn't come with conditions. It was a rare feeling, one she hadn't realized she'd been craving until it was right there in front of her. The man sat relaxed, his shoulders at ease in a way that contrasted sharply with the stiff posture of the other adults in the room. He seemed entirely uninterested in impressing anyone. The girl, now more confident, swung her feet lightly under the chair, humming something faintly as she glanced between Isabel and the cupcake remnants. Every now and then, Isabel's eyes drifted toward the rest of the table. The other children were still gathered in their cluster, laughing loudly over something on a phone screen. None of them looked her way. Her father was deep into yet another conversation, his expression sharp, his tone calculated. Amelia was laughing at some joke from a man in a designer suit, her diamond earrings catching the light. None of them noticed what was happening at the far end of the table. The man's gaze followed hers once, briefly, before returning to her face. He didn't need to ask what she was thinking. Somehow he seemed to know. There was a quiet understanding in his eyes, the kind that told her he'd seen this kind of scene before, seen the way people could be in the same room yet live in completely separate worlds. The girl reached into the paper bag again, this time pulling out a folded piece of paper. She placed it on the table in front of Isabel and nudged it toward her with a small grin. When Isabel unfolded it, she saw a hand-drawn picture, a birthday cake with 13 candles, surrounded by two stick figures holding hands with a third one in a wheelchair. Above it, written in neat, careful letters, were the words, "Happy Birthday, Isabel." Her breath caught. It wasn't just the drawing, it was the fact that they knew her name. Somehow, without fanfare, they had learned it. No one else had bothered to use it all day except for the servers announcing when the cake would be presented. She looked from the paper to the girl, whose smile was shy but steady. Then to the man, who gave a single slow nod as if confirming that yes, this was meant for her and her alone. The noise of the party faded further into the background. The clinking of glasses, the hum of small talk, the hollow laughter, it all seemed distant now. Isabel traced her fingers over the drawing, feeling the faint grooves left by the pencil. It was imperfect, uneven, but real. For a moment, she imagined what it would be like if the rest of her birthday had been like this. Small, genuine gestures instead of grand displays no one truly meant. The man glanced at his watch, then toward the entrance of the hall. There was a subtle shift in his posture, like he was weighing whether they should stay longer or leave before drawing too much attention. But before he could decide, a sharp voice rang out across the room. It was Amelia. Her stepmother was striding toward them, her heels clicking sharply against the marble. Her eyes were fixed on Isabel, but not in warmth. There was something tight, almost cold, in her expression. The girl's smile faltered. The man straightened in his chair. And Isabel felt her stomach tighten, because she knew Amelia had never liked moments she couldn't control. Amelia's approach cut through the room like a blade, her presence commanding attention in the worst possible way. The chatter near her faded slightly, guests sensing the tension in the click of her heels and the sharpness of her gaze. She stopped at the head of the table, her manicured hands resting lightly on the back of a chair, though her posture was anything but relaxed. Her eyes swept over the man and the young girl briefly, but without the courtesy of acknowledgement. Instead, her focus locked on Isabel. It was the kind of look that could strip away joy in a heartbeat, a silent reprimand, an unspoken reminder of where power lay. Isabel felt the air around her grow colder. She had seen this look before. It was the one Amelia wore whenever she caught Isabel doing something she hadn't orchestrated, something unscripted that didn't fit the image of the perfect Beaumont family. The man didn't flinch. If anything, his stillness became more deliberate, as though refusing to shrink beneath the weight of her disapproval. The girl, however, lowered her eyes, folding her hands in her lap. Amelia leaned in just slightly, her voice soft but edged with that sugary venom she used in public. Whatever words she spoke, they were meant for Isabel's ears only. The tone wasn't outright cruel, Amelia knew better than to make a scene, but it carried that familiar undertone. "You're embarrassing us." Isabel didn't respond. She kept her eyes on the drawing still lying on the table in front of her. The bright, clumsy lines of the birthday cake and stick figures seemed to anchor her against the chill creeping in. The man finally moved, leaning forward with calm precision. He didn't interrupt Amelia, but his presence shifted, becoming a quiet shield between Isabel and whatever sting was laced into those words. His expression didn't change, but something in the way he held himself made it clear. He was not afraid of her. For a fleeting moment, Isabel wondered if Amelia would insist they leave. She had done it before, ushered away guests she deemed out of place, with a polite smile that masked a blade. But this time Amelia hesitated. The man's steady gaze seemed to hold her there, making it harder for her to assert control without revealing the cracks in her perfect facade. Finally, Amelia straightened, her smile returning for the benefit of anyone watching. She gave Isabel a parting glance, cool, assessing, before gliding away toward her next circle of influence. The tension didn't vanish immediately. Isabel exhaled slowly, realizing only then that she'd been holding her breath. The girl peeked up from under her lashes, as if checking to see if it was safe to smile again. The man reached for the drawing, turning it gently so that it faced Isabel once more. It was a small gesture, but it carried the unspoken message that whatever had just happened, it didn't have to take this moment from her. From across the room, Isabel caught sight of her father again. He was laughing with another guest, utterly unaware, or perhaps deliberately oblivious, to what had just transpired. And in that instant, Isabel knew something for certain. The man and the girl weren't here because of her father's world. They were here in spite of it. She didn't know why yet, or what had brought them to her table in the first place. But she knew the answer was close. She could feel it in the way the man's eyes lingered on her with a depth that wasn't casual. And just as she began to wonder, the girl reached for the paper bag again, this time pulling something from its bottom that made Isabel's breath catch. From the bottom of the paper bag the girl pulled out a small, weathered photo. Its edges were worn, the colors slightly faded with time. She placed it on the table in front of Isabel with quiet care, almost as if it might break if handled too roughly. Isabel looked down and felt a jolt of surprise. The photo showed a much younger version of herself, 6 years old, smiling wide in a park. She was standing, no wheelchair in sight, holding a balloon in one hand and clutching the hand of a woman she didn't immediately recognize. The woman was black, wearing a soft yellow sundress, her hair wrapped in a bright scarf. Her smile was radiant, the kind that seemed to light up everything around her. Her heart pounded. She remembered that day in fragments. A warm afternoon, the smell of cotton candy, laughter that felt like music. She remembered falling down and scraping her knee, and the woman in the photo kneeling beside her, wiping away tears with the gentlest touch. The man's voice finally broke the silence, not loud, not sharp, but steady. He told her the woman in the photo had been a close friend of her late mother. She had looked after Isabel when she was very young, long before the accident, long before her father's world had swallowed everything soft in her life. And then came the truth Isabel hadn't expected. The woman had passed away a year ago, but before she did she had asked the man, her own son, to find Isabel. She'd told him, make sure she knows she was loved. The weight of those words settled over Isabel like a blanket. The girl beside him was his younger sister, and together they had carried out their mother's last wish. The party around them might as well have disappeared. In that moment, the grand hall, the crystal chandeliers, the carefully staged displays of wealth, they all felt meaningless. What mattered was the truth in front of her, that even in the years she'd felt invisible, someone had been holding a space for her in their heart. Her throat tightened, but she didn't cry. Instead, she placed her hand over the photo, her fingers brushing against the girl's. No one had ever brought her a gift that felt so deeply hers. The man smiled faintly, not with triumph, but with quiet relief. His sister leaned in, and the three of them sat there for a moment that felt suspended in time. Three people bound not by circumstance, but by a shared thread of love that had survived distance, years, and silence. When Isabel finally looked up, she caught her father watching from across the room. For a split second their eyes met, but she didn't look away. For the first time she felt a strength in herself that didn't need his approval. The music swelled again as the servers prepared to serve the official birthday cake. Guests turned toward the center of the room, glasses raised, ready to sing. But Isabel stayed where she was. Because she'd already had her real celebration, one that no camera could stage, no amount of money could buy. And as the first notes of happy birthday filled the air, she smiled, not for the room but for the two people beside her, the ones who had shown up simply to see her. They were the gift. And she knew she'd carry that with her for the rest of her life. Twilight Tales, stories that touch the heart, stir the soul, and remind you of the power of human connection. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe to Twilight Tales for more powerful narratives like this. Like, share, and comment your thoughts below. Your engagement keeps these stories alive.